Okay, so part two. I I realized the other day that I had kind of glanced over a really important part of my childhood, and that was going over to my grandma's house. And my grandma, she had a bunch of the old school classic action movies, and she had Rambo First Blood Part 1, First Blood Part 2. She had the Rambo 3 movie. She had a bunch of Jean-Claude Van Damme movies. She had like one or two of the Steven Seagal action movies. And my favorite was pretty obviously the Rambo movies, and specifically the first one. I would watch that movie like almost every time I visited her house. And later on in life, even when I had step siblings, I'd still end up trying to drag that movie out and make everybody else watch it. And I had forgotten all about that until I was telling that story. And I got into talking about the rope and everything. And it reminded me of this scene in Rambo where he comes across these like dilapidated cars that are out in the backwood. And he pulls this kind of half tarp out of one of the cars and cuts it down and wraps it around with a little length of rope around his chest to make like an impromptu rain jacket. I was just reminded of that because I watched that movie all the time. I got into like if I had to survive in the backwood and sharpening sticks up and hiding in the bushes and making my own little impromptu camo and stuff. And that ended up making me into somebody who thought of survival in that mindset. I just found it interesting that I had forgotten about that. Because actually later on, when I started getting close to teenage years, a longtime friend of my father, he ended up giving me one of those like cheap Rambo movie knockoff knives where the handle opens up and it's able to hold matches and some fishing line and stuff. And I loved that knife for a little while, but then I don't remember what happened to it after all these years now. I ended up getting into much better paid knives after that. So kind of funny. But anywho, yeah, it started off where I was always dreaming and thinking about like being Rambo and how cool it is to be Rambo. And I know a lot of older guys went through that same phase because Rambo is just the coolest movie ever back in the day. Nowadays, not so much because people suck. But I started doing all kinds of things like climbing around in the backwood and everything. And when I would go out to the back of the farm, I think a lot of the like imagination side of things probably had a lot to do with the Rambo movie and movies. Because I did watch the first three at a very young age, and I watched the next one that came out, the newer production one, years later when it actually came out in theater. But that sort of ties all back into where I was ending part one off, is when I would be out in the forest with that buddy of mine playing airsoft. I would actually like sneak around through the forest all low crawl in the brush, and we would get in like airsoft battles where we would start shooting at each other with the airsoft, and then I would vanish into thin air for him. He'd be shooting. I'd kind of drop and take a low crawl position, place a couple of shots, and when he would recover, I would like displace and then run to a different position real quick, and then slowly kind of low crawl away out of that position and disappear. And I did it to him at least a good 3 times. I think the first 2 times he actually ended up finding me again as I'd be trying to like reposition back over and get to him. But when I Did it the third time, it was actually 3 of us playing airsoft. And it ended up kind of being like 2 versus 1. And they were searching for me in the middle of like a boatload of trees and brush. And I managed to juke them real quick and then just vanish into the weeds. And because I pulled that one on them, I sat there and slowly slunk away and just disappeared completely. And they couldn't find me again until I finally met back up with them on the main trail that was going through that area. And they were kind of, I don't think they were shocked, but they were kind of surprised that I had just like vanished and they couldn't find me with 2 of them. But those kind of things, they helped put into like practice or like action LARPing kind of thing. Just being in the backwood and like adventuring around and stuff. Sorry, this person was driving funny. I would go out with him all the time into the woods and play airsoft and like adventure around and skateboard and all that. That I started to just be comfortable with that idea of just like monkeying around in the forest all the time. So I do kind of miss that nowadays, just as a side thing. And I would every once in a while take the machete out there and go like whack some bush and stuff. But sorry, I keep getting distracted. I had a moment where there was actually some dudes that messed. Oh, that actually doesn't have anything. I'll tell it anyway since I brought it up though. There was some dudes that we were skateboarding by, and there was like 5 or 6 guys that kind of circled up around my little brother. They're all just big old giant Tongan guys out there. That the guys that are out there, they're like unified gangs that are usually kind of families. And it was just this big family of like islanders, just huge dudes. And they all kind of circled around my brother, and a couple of them like had their hands behind their back and stuff, or just one. So you know they were like holding on to either a knife or a screwdriver, just doing their typical stuff. And they kind of accosted my brother for his hat. They were messing around, kind of trying to take the skateboard. And I rolled up, and I wish I could say that I was like the hero that rolled in there and like fought off 5 guys that were like 3 times my weight, and a couple of them taller than me. But no, I rolled up and was kind of like just locked in and entranced by the fact that the whole situation was unfolding right in front of me. I was still only 18 at the time too, so back then I wasn't quite as chiseled as I am now. I was just kind of a lanky skateboarder kid. So I rolled up to him, and we're sitting there just kind of like being hustled for our stuff in a sense. And the good thing was we were like dirt ass poor, so we didn't have nothing. There was literally just a skateboard between each of us, and they had some hats on that were probably like $20-$30. But as we're sitting there getting like harassed and accosted by these guys, a police officer rolls up, and he's like staring down the gangsters, and he's like looks over to us and goes, "You guys okay? Is there anything wrong?" And we're kind of like, don't really want to say anything because these guys live like a fucking block from our house. We don't want to poke the bear because they will definitely be trying to rob us later on. So we just kind of gave them the whole like, yeah, everything's fine. And all of a sudden those gangster guys kind of flipped, and they were like, oh yeah, it's all fine, no big deal. And they gave us all of our stuff back after the cop drove off. And all of a sudden they were like, yeah, we're cool now. And all of a sudden it was like friendship. And they walked with us a little bit towards the skate park. And we kind of were like, all right, well, we're going to go skateboard, and just zipped off into the distance. So that like spurred for me just like this burning hatred for being around gangsters. And my lifestyle's changed a bit now, but when I was in that 18 to 20, 22 time frame, I was like absolutely despised gangsters because we would be accosted by them all the time, and they were just absolute pieces of trash. Just everything in that area, it was always stirred up by gangsters. And I kind of hated them for a while. And there's a few times that I talked to one of my older brothers. I kept telling him, I'm like, I'd see them go to the little basketball court, and I'd grab my machetes and be like, I'm going to freaking run down and show them what's up. And he's like, dude, you're stupid. They're going to fucking shoot you in the face. You're going to be dead forever because you're an idiot. And I realized it's like you can't just like anger, violence your way into stuff and make situations better for yourself. Like, that's absolutely true. But it left me with this, like, I need a way to defend myself kind of mindset. And we ended up having another scenario pop with the same gang, not the same gangsters, but the same exact gang that they all are associated with. We were walking another night, me and that same buddy that goes out to the backwood, and we were drinking together, and his uncle had gotten absolutely trashed, just super, super drunk. And we were kind of wandering around the city late at night. So obviously, don't go stupid places at stupid times with stupid people to do stupid things, or you'll get stupid results. So sure as shit, we end up getting stupid results. We're wandering along, and his uncle keeps just like fumbling around and like crashing into stuff, laughing and joking and being an idiot. And he sees a gangster across the street that's like just hooded up and just walking on his own. And his uncle ends up biffing it, like just straight to the ground, kind of biffs it and does like a half tuck and roll thing. And as he gets back up, the gangbanger's kind of laughing a little bit. And his uncle, shit you not, man, looks over at him, gives him like the stank eye and kind of asks him like, what's up? Just like, are you kidding me? And the gangster's like, I seen you fall. And the uncle, like a fucking idiot, hops up and he's like, you fucking what? And starts shit with him right off the spot. It was like, man, are you kidding me? Like, what is happening right now? Why are you starting crap? And obviously, drunk mindset, so he's being an idiot. And the gangster's kind of like, I seen you fall. Next thing you know, he's trying to like fight the guy, and we're telling him, we're like, hey man, he's just drunk and being stupid. Don't worry about it. He's like, no, come over. Like we can fight. It's no big deal. Just like follow me. We'll take you over and we'll tee up. And we're like, no, man, don't worry about it. He's just drunk. He's saying stupid stuff. But he's like trailing along his uncle, and his uncle's just like drunk, stupid, following him. And they end up dragging him towards the direction of these guys' like apartment complexes. And we're like yanking at him. We're like, stop, man, like quit following him. He's gonna freaking jack your ass up, and he's probably gonna get his buddies. So we finally get him to break off, and we're like leading him back towards my buddy's house. And out of nowhere, we hear like the thud of like shoes flapping against the ground real hard. And two of them are just speed running towards us, like mad, full sprint. And one of them, he's got this like stick, billy club looking thing in his hand, and runs up and whacks his uncle in the back of the head, splits his head open right on the spot. And he goes tumbling to the ground. And then homeboy throws the stick over to the littler one, and little homie catches it and runs up to me and the other kid. And the other guy's sitting there teeing off on him on the ground, and they're fighting. And honestly, for being extremely drunk, he was still doing okay with like a little bit of tucking and rolling on the ground. He wasn't doing too bad for a super, super drunk guy, but he was getting hit. He was getting hit a few times over. And the other one comes back and he's got the stick like cocked back like he's going to swing it at us. He's like telling us to empty out our pockets. And it's like, bro, I'm dirt ass poor. I ain't got shit on me. And he keeps like fainting like he's going to swing it. So I'm like hands up trying to basically get ready to protect my face and get down if we have to get down kind of thing. And he said something, I'm going to misquote him obviously because I don't really care how he said it. He said something along the lines like, you got punked out by 12th Side Street or something like that. I forget how he said it, but it's the little tiny area that leads back to the apartment complexes he was living in. It was like, what the fuck is happening right now? So he ends up, because we got nothing on us, so he's like not like trying to actually get anything because he realizes we ain't got shit. And he like runs over to the other guy and he's like, let's go. And they just take off running. And his uncle is, or the two of them run off, and my buddy's uncle, he's got like a big old gash on the back of his head from that stick that's like bleeding down the side of his neck and everything because it's split right on the top of his head, but behind near the back where his neck is. Like that point where the brain stem kind of like melds into the top of your skull. He had a split right above that up on the top of his skull. And it was bleeding not super bad, but it was bleeding enough that it was like, God. And we managed to get through the whole situation without little dude attacking us. I don't know, maybe it's because like there's two of us, one of him. All it would take is like we overwhelm him and then they have a whole different fight going on in their hands. Especially if I could get that stick out of him. Because I was a baseball player for years. So if I could wrestle that stick away from him, then the tides would turn hella fast. I would absolutely be mopping the floor with both of them. They'd probably be getting severely beaten and potentially injured in a way that I would go to jail. So thank God that played out bad, but not severely bad, because man, if I had had a record, it would have just totally changed and ruined my life, all because of these idiots acting stupid. It left me with like a mindset of, man, I cannot just adventure around town without some kind of protection. So me and that buddy, we started carrying all kinds of stuff on us. We had like brass knuckles and knives and things on us all the time. Because it was like, man, if we ever get in a scenario like this again where they try and go at us, we're going to put up a fight. They're going to find out the hard way that you just never know who you might end up catching. And it trickled into a totally different mindset for me of self-defense and like preparedness in a violence type of way, like being ready to meet violence with violence. I had a couple more altercations over the years that they're not really pertinent to the story, but it lended itself to me always being ready. There's another story where a guy actually was threatening me with a knife in his house, and I drew down on him, and I told him, like, if you fucking move, I'm going to put you down. I'm going to put a bullet in your head. And that situation, like, wired up in a weird way. He started threatening me with, like, I'll go get my wife's gun right now. And it was like, dude, you ain't going nowhere. You try to move right now and walk towards your wife's gun, I'm going to put you down. That was just a horrible moment. And it made me realize, too, that if you go over to people's houses, you put yourself in a totally different threat scenario if you don't know whose house you're walking into. I think I side-railed the conversation a little bit, but it did bring up a little bit more of how my mindset became what it is today. But I'm almost at the shop again, so we're gonna wind down to basically a lot of events that happened while I had moved states up to Washington. It changed me for, I don't know, maybe the better, but maybe the worse. It took a while for me to filter, like, you can't be the bad guy in those scenarios. You need to be the good guy that's prepared. But to be the good guy that's prepared, you can't be doing, like I said, going stupid places at stupid times with stupid people for stupid reasons and not expecting to get stupid results. That's how you stay away from being the bad guy. Because the bad guy, he's not protecting himself. In some cases he might, but if he's being a bad guy and protecting himself because he's a bad guy, then the results of his defense are kind of mute or like null and voided, because what he's doing is being a criminal in the first place. That's why you can't defend yourself committing a crime and get away with it in court, because you were committing a crime. Anyways, man, I should have wrapped this up better. But we'll trudge into the next video and we'll make part 3. There might be a part 4. We'll see. I'll try to condense things down a little better on the next one. But needless to say, it's part 2. If you're liking the series, cool, give a comment, throw a thumbs up, subscribe if you like prepping content in general, because there's just going to be a ton more content coming. Anyway, thanks for watching and have a good day.